Configuring neovim can be daunting, but it doesn't have to be. We can create a fully featured web dev IDE for a neovim in just 140 lines of neovim config. And if I say fully featured, let's have a look at what I mean. So it means we get syntax highlighting, of course, with nice color previews, even previews for CSS variables. We get format unsafe. So I made this change right here, and if I change, it gets re-indented to what it should be. And you did see we get information about changes we made to the Git status. So this is yellow right here because I changed this line, change it back. It's now not a Git change anymore. We get search for files. We get right here in package.json information about how far we are behind with our npm modules. We get a file manager to add new files. And we get LSP integration. That means we get these little hints about what objects can do, like window has, of course, add event listener. Yeah. So what does it take to get all that? Let's have a look at the config and start at line 1, and we'll go down all the way to 139. So it's not a very long way. The first 3 lines are completely optional. These enable experimental loader for neovim that caches the bytecode of all plugins and makes the first startup faster that way, because the plugins don't need to be compiled every time, just when they change. So I think this will become the default at some point, but right now it's opt-in, and it does make your first start faster if you want that. Afterwards, we have a package manager. I'm using pack, which is a very minimal package manager. It's only about 500 lines of code. And yeah, it does everything I needed to do. What it doesn't do, what, for example, lazy can do, is lazy loading. So not loading all of the plugins when neovim first starts, but loading them at a later point in time when they're needed, which can make the startup time even faster. But for me, it's not really an issue because startup time is more or less instant. So if I can use a software package with less complexity to do what I needed to do, I'm going to need use that, and for me that's pack. If you want to install pack on your system, you need to do that manually. Let's have a look at the documentation. So this is the README MD for pack, which tells us that it's simple, fast, and small, and also that you need to run these two, or this command, to first install it. I've already done that, so not doing that again. Once is enough. But afterwards, you have pack, and you can tell it first off to manage itself and all of the other plugins you have for neovim. You can use the command pack sync, which will fetch all the current versions of the plugins, so you can keep up to date or install new ones. And yeah, that's mostly what it does. So first off, it's going to look after itself and update itself if necessary. Afterwards, I have two plugins which are dependencies of other plugins. Plenary is a collection of utilities used by Telescope, among many other plugins, and NUI is a collection of UI widgets that's used by package info. That's the plugin you saw earlier, which can show you inside a package.json if you're out of date, what's the most current version of a package is. Also very nice. I have a theme, Node, that I'm using, and in case you're wondering, I'm using it with the Vira font and inside the Kitty terminal. We have git signs, which enabled us to show in the gutter, so in the number right here, if a line is changed or added or deleted. We have Line, which gives us a nice status line at the bottom. Telescope, which gives us these floating windows, which allows us to find files or see the open buffers, stuff like that. Auto close, this allows us to auto close braces. So if I just type in the opening brace, it's going to enter the closing brace as well and put us in the middle. That's handy. And auto tag does the same for HTML tags. Doesn't work in here because it's a Lua file. Also very handy. Emmet gives us the Emmet abbreviation syntax. So I'm able to write something like UL, and within it two LIs, and Emmet can turn this into this HTML structure. Also pretty handy. And Vim Surround is a plugin that allows us to change, add, or delete surrounding characters, like this right here. So I can change, say, CS for change surround. This I want to change to this. So if I do it manually, I have to go to the beginning and change this one, and then change this one, and with Vim Surround, I can do it all in one command. spconfig does the language server provider config, also very handy. Carbon is the file browser, which you briefly saw, which is a tree file browser, very simple one, package intro we talked about, and vsnip. And this vsnip integration allow snippets like this one for React development. Saves me a bunch of time when adding new use state. CMP is the completion plugin, which gives us this kind of hints that we can use, and can do the same thing for paths. So you see right here, it knows about our file system and auto-completes paths. Also handy. It can take paths, part of the open buffer, the open file, and complete it. Can take snippets, or it can take information from the language service provider, which understands the language you're currently writing. This right here highlights CSS colors, This does auto formatting when you save. And this right here also understands a bit about the syntax of the open file and allows, among other things, syntax highlighting. And basics, that's the last one, has some good defaults how to configure your neovim so we can have less lines in this config right here. For example, it does things like if you copy something with yank, it highlights what it just yanked, which really should be the default because it's just good user experience to give some feedback about what's happening in a program. So these are all of the plugins. They are enough. And now we have configuration beyond what Mini Basics does. I'm using the system clipboard. So by default, neovim has its own clipboard, and there's no real way, well, no very obvious way to paste something from the system clipboard. So here I'm telling it, just use the system clipboard, which makes it easier to take something from a browser, Stack Overflow answer, and paste it in the code. I'm also telling it indent by 2. And even if I'm using tab, use soft tab, use spaces. The only thing where I'm disagreeing with Mini Basics is I don't want a cursor line. Cursor line would be something where the complete line where the cursor is highlighted. I think the cursor itself is enough, so I'm turning that one off. What I do want is this line here to the right, which tells me where 80 characters end, so I'm not having lines that go beyond that, at least sometimes. Here in this config I do. And the signs that git signs adds to the document, I want them to replace the number. I don't need to see both. So next ones are a bit more special. I'm using a leader key. So for example, if I want to open the find window, I'm using space F. Like that. And space as leader key is also set by Mini Basics. And for that reason, I don't want space to have its default behavior in normal mode or in visual mode, which is to advanced one character to the right. So I'm turning that off. Also, I'm using braces to navigate between paragraphs. So if I hit a brace, jumps to the next paragraph, which is a nice way to navigate between semantic units for most files. For JSON, for example, it's not. But what I don't want in that case is that these jumps are added to the jump list. So with Control O or Control I can go back to the last jump or forward to the next jump. And I don't want these small jumps in there. I mostly want jumps between files. So I'm deactivating these. Also very much optional and just have to do with my style of working. And I have a color scheme that's called Nord. That's nice and minimal as well. And these are all of my basic settings. Afterwards, we have our plugins. A lot of these are just started. So for Lua plugins, you need to require them and run setup for most of them. For them to be present, nothing happening here really. We have Line, and I agree with parts of the default Line setup. So Line has 6 areas in the line below. There's ABC and XYZ. ABC at the left end and XYZ at the right end. And A and Z can stay as they are, but B, C, X, Y have changed. So B is the file name, C is diagnostics, so warnings from the LSP. X is the encoding file type, and Y is the branch. So these are my modifications to the default Lline setup. Also, we have Treesitter. So in order for Treesitter to do anything, it needs to install some languages. So we tell it we want all of these web dev languages to be installed by default. Please auto install them. We want syntax highlighting, which is also not enabled by default. And we want smart indenting, so it knows how things are nested and indents to the right place. We don't want that for Python because indentation in Python, of course, is special. But otherwise, we want that. So we turn that on. We have Emmet, as you saw. Emmet has its own leader key, which we set to comma. And it's useful to have our own leader key for that, because what we're able to do is to select a tag or multiple tags, and then I can press comma, comma, and I get this prompt at the very bottom, which asks me what I want to surround this with. So I can add a new div with cat around that, and that's a very quick way to add new surrounding tags, which is hard to do if you just use the Emmet LSP. Can remove it again. So we have telescope, which is a way to show lists basically, list of files, list of buffers, list of search results, and I have some keys set up for that. So leader F is find files, leader B shows me the open buffers, leader slash is live grep, so is search, just like slash is search within the document. Leader slash is search within the project, which I think is a good mnemonic, and which I've taken from Helix. And similarly, leader star does search for the current string within the whole project. We have carbon as a file tree, which is a very minimal file tree. We started in floating window mode. If you don't want that, you can also have it as a side, like you have in vcode. And I have some minimal changes to it. I use A to add new files, and I change the background color of the float to one of the Node colors. That's it. And we have our LSP config. Right here, I tell it what language server providers I want. So I have TypeScript, ESLint, Starlint, CSS, Astro, Svelte, and Rubocop for Ruby. All of these need to be installed for them to work. For most of them, that just means installing the correct npm package. And you have to Google which one that is. If you don't want to manually install them, you can use something like Mason to auto-install it. But installing them globally has the upside that you also have them present in Helix, for example, if you have another system that uses the LSP. And I also have some key bindings to use them. Future versions of neovim are going to have default key bindings for this, so these lines might go away. I have gr for rename, gd to go to definition, ga to run a code action, and this one runs both in normal mode and in visual mode. Visual mode is selecting several lines. So sometimes there's a code action that runs on a whole function, so that makes sense. And we have go to next diagnostic and previous diagnostic. There are actually default mappings for these, but they're very hard to use on a German keyboard, so I had my own for that. CMP is the completion, the little drop-down with hints that uses vsnip as snippet engine to give me snippets like console log, very handy. This also is something that might go away soon. There's already in 0.10 a built-in completion or built-in snippet parser in neovim, but it's still a bit limited. So for the time being, I'm staying with vsnip, hopefully not too long. And I have some mappings. So within the completion window, with tab and s-tab, I can go back and forth. So it's kind of like in VS Code. And with enter, I accept. There's no default mapping in CMP. You have to set up some kind of mapping. And these are the sources, the different sources that give CMP things that are hints, that are possible solutions for a situation you're in. So first of all, the snippets, then the feedback from the LSP, words that are in the buffer, or possible paths on the file system. The order right here is relevant, so what is in first position also gets displayed first in the dropdown. So order them in a way that makes sense for you. That's all for CMP. And we have a new format as a formatter. In order for that to run on save, we have to add this auto command, which runs new format before a buffer gets written to disk. And yeah, the formatter for Ruby is a bit broken, so I deactivated that one. But otherwise, new format auto magically does everything you wanted to do. For every language, it has a list of formatters and it picks the one you have. So if you have prettier in your setup, it chooses prettier. And if you have Rubocop, it chooses that for the right file type. No need to set it up really. And that's it. That's line 139. And it gives you, or at least it gives me, everything I need to work with neovim daily on web projects. And it works pretty well. So that's enough. Have fun setting up your own neovim config. The link to my config on GitHub is somewhere in the video notes. And yeah, thanks for listening.